Joining me right now on the program is the editorial director of digital media and industrial media, which produces publications such as Industrial Equipment News, which has been around since 1933, and among other sites. But what we're going to talk more about is his area where the website he is an editor-in-chief of, Cannabis Equipment News. He hosts their weekly podcast, and he's an editor-in-chief of CannabisEquipmentNews.com. I'm here with David Mantey. David, thanks for being on.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me today.
So much like the programs I host, Blunt Business and Grassroots Marketing, and we kind of talk about very much the same areas of issues, but I wanted to get your take on what you've been talking about and who you've been talking with. When we looked up through the list and the catalog of people you've hosted on the program yourself, I see a lot of familiar names on my end here that we've definitely talked to here. I see Maria Thassan and Kim Sanchez-Rael and all these others just in the last few weeks I see right now. And there's been a lot of various issues that you look at as well. When it comes to AI and the MasterCard issue, so really, let me go and take you first of all with the podcast itself, because I know what my approach is. I like to go ahead and take the experts I have the opportunity to speak with on the program and have them speak on various current issues, or there's shows that are obviously always that go to the background and lead into shop talk. What would be the best way that you would describe on how the Cannabis Equipment News podcast is presented and what you like to go ahead and get the most out of those guests?
I guess we're definitely more the background and then lead into shop talk. I really like to get to know a little bit more about our guests, how they came to the cannabis industry. I always find it particularly interesting, their personal journey, just because cannabis industry, it's so new. And, a lot of people find themselves in this industry and they never would have envisioned it being a spot for them, short term, let alone a long term career. So I get into the background a little bit. Then we talk about how they're impacting the industry. You talked about Marion with Simplify. We talk about how they're revolutionizing compliance in the industry. I've talked to the people at Sorting Robotics, Notal Partansky, how he's taking.
We just had him on. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting story of a man with a NASA engineering background, taking that expertise and kind of bringing next level engineering to a cannabis industry that, has a different focus up until now. I think that we're kind of raising the bar when it comes to equipment manufacturing in the industry.
One of the areas you've been talking about, actually, in particular, when you talked about Notal, is you did a Q&A with him and you talked about how he now has a new robot, the Gigo Plus Donut Maker. We actually talked about it on our Grassroots Marketing series. And the idea is that being able to go and generate 800 donut style infused pre-rolls per hour and bringing labor costs down from $5 a joint to 10 cents a joint.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of areas we talked about when it comes to, first of all, the production of pre-rolls, the areas of, I've had guests on that talked about the kind of the using the pre-rolls as more of a sampler, as kind of the Costco model they had talked about, on being able to go ahead and get more people to go and experience and try out flower when they're at a dispensary, just to get the feel of what they're having out there, because various dispensaries, various products, that kind of idea. Things that help kind of create more engagement to the dispensary experience. For any of that, what would you say that you look at when it comes to what AI can do now, production that we can have, and what can be offered now to enhance the experience and allow more products to be noticed?
Well, there's a split there. AI is different from automation. I think automation is going to play a huge role in the industry when it comes to consistency of product. Right. Just because brand integrity is something that is incredibly important. And it's incredibly important, particularly when we have a state, independent states operating where you can't share product across state lines. So you need to make sure that your standard operating procedures, you need to make sure that your production lines are running identically state to state. So that way your brand integrity holds up in various markets. You can't make everything in California yet and send it everywhere. So that way everyone's getting the exact same pre-roll across the nation. And automation, particularly what Natal is doing, you raise some incredible figures, going from $5 to 10 cents per pre-roll. I mean, that ROI kind of just speaks for itself. And you're also talking about taking something that was typically done by hand, automating it so that way you have a more consistent experience for the user. Or for the consumer. When you talk about AI, there's a lot of crazy stuff that could happen out there in terms of how people could use generative AI, not just in marketing in terms of cannabis, but in terms of like actually crop steering and how they could change things from a best practices standpoint from a cultivation when it comes to cultivation. But AI also stands to make a really big impact when it comes to compliance documentation.
Now, one of the areas I look at with AI is that when we're looking at, see, I know I went down that rabbit hole talking about where if using the technology to help mass produce more, to create more of an experience for dispensaries, the same thing I also look at when it comes to AI. I'm always thinking about just brainstorming. All right, with every bit of AI that's brought into the space, whether it's through software as a service or it's put in through whatever kind of cultivation software there is out there, I always try to think about the human component and about with every business, every industry right now, you're looking at if automation comes into play, how many jobs are taken out of that, or how many jobs will be replaced with those that need to go ahead and implement that technology. When you look at some of the people that you've had on your podcast, what is one of the things they've said about when it comes to AI, when it comes to streamlining the manufacturing process and streamlining the supply chain process?
Right. When it comes to automation, and we've seen this, I have a deep background in the manufacturing industry. Automation doesn't replace jobs. Automation creates new jobs. And I know that seems kind of like just a talking point to make people less fearful of automation, but it's really proven true in a number of industries. And I think when you look at labor shortages, particularly in the cannabis industry, automation is something where you can find good people working on the line, working in various parts of your business, and really help prop them up into new roles that stand to make a bigger impact on your bottom line. Automation is something where, there are a lot of good people hand rolling. There are a lot of good people doing other tasks, trimming that could be automated to some extent, depending on, sort of your secret recipe or how you do business, go to market. And I think automation really serves to open up people to new roles within the company and kind of help alleviate that labor struggle that we're going through right now. When I could talk about AI as well, AI creating new jobs, that's a whole new rabbit hole that we are kind of just scratching the surface on, right? Like AI, those are the roles where you're going to be looking for AI prompters, right? The people that can ask the right questions, give the correct instructions to make sure that the AI spits out what you're looking for, right? Those are going to be your high value targets. And one of the craziest things that I can think of when it comes to AI is I think the beer maker was Kemp's, right? Did you see the experiment where they did everything from AI made the recipe as to how to brew the beer all the way through marketing?
I didn't get a chance to say that. No.
So I think there is, and it was a gimmick. I could definitely see that translating to the cannabis industry where you give the AI the prompts like, this is where I'm growing. This is how I'm growing. What should I grow? How should I grow it? Then all the way through the process to how I should market it and who I should market it to. Even to Kemp's even had AI write the marketing copy for social media, the script for commercials, and I could see that being not just a gimmick. I mean, a gimmick in the immediate future for the cannabis industry, but an actual tool that could be used in the industry going forward, maybe not so long term as we think.
The other thing I also talk about when it comes to manufacturing in the area, and I'm not sure what areas kind of fall into what you would talk about on the podcast in particular places, but I know for blunt business and grassroots marketing, we talk about social equity. We talk a lot about compliance, loads of compliance, and various issues. The one thing I always keep hearing about is where people might have various ways to tag or, identify with whatever compliance practices you have. But one of the areas that we've heard a lot about that people might be kind of budging against or kind of pushing back against is the idea of instituting good manufacturing practices, GMPs.
Mhm.
When you talk to the people that you've had on and just the information, what's the overall feeling if we were to go ahead and convert into instilling good manufacturing practices across the board?
Yeah. The short answer is you have to.
Right.
As this industry grows, further legitimizes, GMP is the most important thing to operators. Excuse me for a second.
Sure.
Particularly as we see, federal legalization, there will be an increase in regulation and scrutiny. Good manufacturing practices is at the heart of that. And I mean, are we going to see it to the extent of the pharmaceutical industry? I'm not certain, but that seems likely. And you looking at the operators and the manufacturers that help you have GMP in your facility is only setting you on the best course going forward. And honestly, I understand people push back because, there's a cost there, right? But if you're looking into the future, you need GMP. If you kind of push back against it, it just seems very short-sighted to me. Whereas if you're setting your business up for the future, you need to have good manufacturing practices in place.
Agreed. And then part of that too is that it's the cost quotient everybody's kind of worried about. They're
Mm-hmm.
so concerned with the fact of the extra paperwork, the extra testing standards that are going to be put in place. But I mean, have you had anybody really that you talked to either through interviews through that are written or on podcasts where people have kind of been hesitant to go that far and to realize it's what we're doing to be more proactive in the industry, but some people might want to stall on those plans until they're actually need to be implemented, and people can just kind of live with whatever the bare minimum that the compliance boards of various states have.
Okay, yeah. Talk to people about that all the time. And I mean, I understand, but we also have to you have to realize that as you're preparing your business for the future, kind of being at the top of the line when it comes to compliance and testing standards, as regulation continues to evolve, you need to be ready for that switch. If you're pushing back on it, you're just going to be further behind the 8 ball when those changes happen. And I mean, I understand it. Compliance software is expensive, right? And it is sometimes hard to calculate the ROI when it comes down to, all right, managing all of this compliance with one person using a software tool and kind of doing that math to make it make sense. But, we had referenced the conversation with Marion earlier. Some of the work that he's doing with I believe it's the Risk Mitigation Alliance, where, insurance companies that work with cannabis operators understand that there is an inherent risk with operators that are out of compliance. So they're working to actually give breaks on Simplify software just because they know it's best practices for an operator to have it, knowing that they'll remain in compliance. And so they kind of work on, okay, if we insure you and you use the software, we'll give you a break on the software because we know that everyone's kind of moving forward and benefiting. And when it comes to testing, I do think that there's still a bit of a wild west out there in terms of people that, there are labs out there that will fudge the numbers, if you will. But again, short-sighted game plan. And I think that people that cheat the system will eventually fall along the wayside. And I understand that testing is very expensive. And we're going to need to get to a different scale in order for testing to be a little bit easier on people. And I also think that regulators are looking at some of the very onerous testing standards that they've put in place, and they're kind of dialing it back a little bit in terms of how often you need to test and at what phase of the process you need to test. So I think there's progress there as well. I think that if you're the operator that just pushes back and says, like, I'm not doing it till I have to, and I'm only going to do what I have to, I mean, really, you're just kind of setting yourself up for failure.
Stay tuned. I have more with David Manti coming up after a short break.
Rolling into some sponsors, but we'll be right back with more Blunt Business.
I'm back here on Blunt Business with David Manti, co-host of the Today in Manufacturing podcast and editor-in-chief at Cannabis Equipment News and the Cannabis Equipment News podcast. And you can learn more about all of that at cannabisequipmentnews.com. One of the other areas that I always look at which of course might not necessarily be tied to manufacturing, but I just think in the process of trying to go ahead and create, keep supply and demand running smoothly, making as much money as you can, revenue, whether it's publicly traded, whether it's just privately. One of the other areas I've talked about a lot on our programming is the illicit market. And, when we talk about social equity, the conversation of legacy operators, not just for them to go ahead and have licenses to be able to go and operate and cultivate. What I'm talking about also is to incorporate legacy operators into the mix of people in management of these various companies. Why does it always have to be people picked out from the Fortune 500 to come into the cannabis space to lead a team? Why aren't there people from the legacy space that can take away from the illicit market and take some of those funds that are being put with every state? What is it, about at least half of sales are still illicit anyway? The part of it is, okay, there's the cost that you're already putting right now in terms of being compliant and being extra compliant. But then there's the part where you can make that money back that you're investing by curbing the illicit market, by taking the things that the illicit market has and pulling it away. Part of it is, I think, taking some of those legacy operators that people have always relied on that are going to go right. They can reform. They can go make their way into the process, show they're going to be right, what they're going to be doing, bring them in. I mean, it should be that way. But has there been any talk about, where that needs to be addressed? If you want the illicit market addressed, I think it's one of the areas you cut.
I think that pulling legacy operators out of the black market is a very interesting strategy, just in terms of like almost doing away with the black market via brain drain. And I think that the simple fact is that it's simply too lucrative. I mean, if you want to pull legacy operators out of the black market, the money's got to be right and the opportunity has to be right. Some companies have done it, particularly on the cultivation side. You've seen legacy cultivators come into larger MSOs. And, every once in a while, there is some sort of butting of heads just because legacy operators have their way of always doing it. That's always worked. And merging that with more of a corporate style, that can cause some friction. But I mean, there's definitely an opportunity there to find more talents. But until regulators crack down on the black market more, it's not on operators to pull talent from the black market. It is on regulators to put a tighter strain on the black market to make it so that people have to move into the more legitimate side of the business. Or, we've heard of plenty of legacy operators finding licenses, finding opportunities, but how difficult it is just in terms of like a legacy business acumen versus, moving into more of a mainstream business. It's difficult. It's a difficult learning curve. And so to that, I understand why sometimes these MSOs are pulling more from a Fortune 500 pedigree, just because they think, hey, this is a business guy who knows how to run the business, right? But we've also seen a lot that like, hey, this business guy knows how to run a business, but he doesn't know how to run a cannabis business.
What I'm saying is a radical approach. There's no doubt about it. But I mean, if it's something where you feel like, listen, you want to have corporate oversight for one, you're going to expand from state to state, but California, New York, there, you can have law enforcement, you can have compliance boards all across the board, try to go ahead and crack down on these control boards, try to crack down on all the illicit markets. But look, you're not going to stop the influx of people in New York City with 10,000 different, vehicles or whatever, or shops that are opening up that have had to go and crack down, or, the amongst the thousands of plants that have had to go and be seized or burnt or destroyed or whatever because of illicit operators that are growing and selling and distributing, and there's nobody stopping it. There's only so much that can be done. Then bring them into the family. That's what I say.
I like that approach. And I mean, there's only so much that can be done in the moment, but over time, a lot can be done. And that's why I think you see a lot of that happening in the New York market, just because it's like the New York cannabis industry is open for business, but the regulated cannabis industry can't stop tripping over its own feet, right? Yeah. So I think over time, though, you will see a course correction, and you will see more of those legacy operators in New York translating to more the legitimate side of the or the legal side of the business. I don't know. I do like the radical approach of, it is smart for cannabis operators, if they're looking for talent, to go looking in all the places that talent exists. But I don't know that you throw an Indeed ad up there and you're just like, hey, looking for cannabis cultivator from illicit space. I would love to see the resumes come in personally.
Now, what are the areas of also talking about is that I'm appreciating the fact that, with Cannabis Equipment News, you're not having to go and deal with things where, the issues of all the different, there's always things that happen when it comes to, where people might say that something is being affected for the brands that are being produced to the actual facilities where people are, there've been issues that, all these different publications like the Atlantic or Politico, like to go and take a tax on the cannabis industry on a regular basis. I appreciate the fact that that's something that doesn't have to happen with publications like yours, because media across the board, to me, if I look at anything that's more mainstream or more widespread or more widely available, that might not be as niche, it's kind of hard to go and break through all that cloud of misinformation, I'm going to say, because in those cases, you people that are not in the industry, but they decide to go and continue to continue to use reefer madness or some stoner stereotype as their reason for continuing to go and try to keep the industry down. But yet that kind of coverage continues to make policymakers hesitant to sign bills that are bipartisan, put in the Congress right now, that could give us a Safe Banking Act, that could give us legalization. What do you think about all that?
I mean, you see those headlines in more traditional mainstream media just because, of the original newspaper adage, if it bleeds, it leads, right? A lot of these traditional media companies are paid per click. They're dependent on ad sales. A lot of these writers are compensated based on the performance of their articles, from clicks, time spent on page, a host of different metrics. So when you look at Joe Reader, Joe Reader is going to always click on how the mayhem of the cannabis industry versus, they're actually doing a lot of things right. That math makes sense to me from mainstream media, but Cannabis Equipment News was born on being a trade publication. So we are a business to business publication that our job is to write stories and cover news in the cannabis industry that helps cannabis operators do their job better on a day-to-day basis. We look at the questions that cannabis operators are asking. We go to our sources within the industry, ask those questions, and create podcasts, articles, news, and other videos, to bring that information to the market. It's, it's more of a symbiotic relationship. Trade publications are more of a symbiotic relationship than the parasitic relationship that you sometimes find in the mainstream media.
Mm-hmm. The issues about trying to go and attack companies' reputations, scandalize them, put them across the board. It's those kind of things that it's another struggle to keep with, all trying to keep this industry where it's showing us above ground, but it's always like from the outside, if you're not in the industry itself, we're constantly targeted. We are basically just a big dartboard that are just getting darts thrown at us on a regular basis.
Yeah, and it's really that there's a lack of context, right? Just because it is a nascent manufacturing industry that makes all the traditional mistakes that you see in a nascent manufacturing industry. There are safety issues. There's issues with new equipment, compliance, cleaning, all of these issues that happen everywhere else every day. But when they happen in the cannabis industry, watch out, because, and then it's news. So it's, we cover those as well, but we cover those incidents from a different angle, where it's like, this is what happened. This is where the operator fell out of compliance. Maybe it was just a simple metric tagging incident. Maybe there was some actual nefarious things where, we just ran a story where they found like an entire second level in the building where, maybe some black market product was being introduced to the operation. So I don't know. It's one thing I like about the industry is that it's very collaborative. It's very insightful. And it seems like for better and never for worse, that people are truly working together to make this industry succeed.
Yep. It's all these obstacles. And honestly, that's the Blunt Business program I host. It's been like that ever since I've been doing it since 2018. I have to just talk about that. It's constant barriers, obstacles, and all these things that are just we're not all can trust. Okay. Stop it. Like everybody wants to go and create the next CanTrust and say, "Well, look, they did this and that." Like completely destroying a company and having to go and make them change their name to the point of and things like that. But but there's always this plus the other things that are always kind of just setbacks for every company that's out there. One of the areas you've talked about and been reporting on is the MasterCard issue, which if we haven't talked about that yet, I want to take from a story from CannabisEquipmentNews.com. The fact that, MasterCard has decided to ban the purchase of cannabis products using its debit cards, which is going to create widespread financial safety impacts on an already struggling industry. And when we see that right there, we already know there's been enough issues when it comes to banking and processing right now, or just getting loans or, being able to go ahead and investments or just getting loans right now. And who's available to go and do that, or who's helping specifically the cannabis industry to help make that possible. There's those areas now too. When you look at that part from what people already had in the last month to go ahead and talk about this so far, what is it so far you've gotten so far that has been talked about among guests or people that you've had in reporting about, who takes the place of MasterCard? Are there other credit card processors already ready to come into play? Is there enough room? Because I know there's a company right now that sponsors with us a program called Freedom to Buy, and they're, setting up a credit card and the same kind of distribution network to be able to do credit card processing. Probably the right time for them to come in because MasterCard doesn't want to do that. I mean, is it more just MasterCard did it because it's just the industry is more of a fringe that they don't want to be a part of, or was there something more to it?
I think companies like MasterCard, major HR companies, major banking institutions, they see a federally illegal industry and they fear how that could have far-reaching impacts on their business. So they don't want to touch it. One thing that I will say about this industry is that whenever these obstacles come into play, they do cause very problematic. They're a problem for operators in the short term, but this industry has proven time and again its ability to innovate when its back is against the wall. I recently interviewed Sunday Seafried with Safe Harbor Financial.
Yeah.
And that is an incredible story of one person who saw an opportunity based out of a Colorado credit union, saw an opportunity for cannabis operators and saw how they were doing business. There's one of the first operators she spoke with at night would go to various ATMs to deposit less than $9,000 cash in each individual ATM. So that way it wasn't flagged. And, she saw a real opportunity where, she went to regulators and said, hey, here's what I'm looking to do. How do I do it right? And, she basically created the template for successful cannabis banking.
Mm-hmm.
And while that doesn't exist for a MasterCard replacement right now perfectly, I do feel like there will be a stopgap until whatever federal legalization, kind of changes MasterCard's mind. One thing that I will say, though, is while there is that innovation, there is also the opportunity for nefarious players to kind of come into play. And so you really have to make sure that you're vetting these new solutions, make sure that they've been around a little bit, talk to previous, just do your due diligence when you're signing on with these companies to make sure that it's kind of not one of those fly-by-night companies that might be taking advantage and might disappear. We've seen that even on the equipment side of business, like all of a sudden the company is making this like multi-million-dollar equipment and then they just go under and then there's no one to service it. There's no one to maintenance it. And you're kind of just left holding the bag with a machine that isn't working and parts that nobody makes anymore. So I don't know. I think the MasterCard issue was a big blow to the industry. One that they've, kind of continue to roll with the punches. And, but I mean, it also just reinforces that cash is king in this business, that cash is king.
We're going to come back with final questions with David Mantey after a short break.
Rolling into some sponsors, but we'll be right back with more Blunt Business.
Welcome back. I'm here with David Mantey, Cannabis Equipment News, CannabisEquipmentNews.com. I want to ask you one last question. This is one of those ongoing, and I'm sure every guest you have on the Cannabis Equipment News podcast will probably talk about this as well. We always got to talk about, we always the hopeful what is the cautiously optimistic. Oh, God, I hate that phrase, but it's one of those things when we talk about legalization. So with the policymakers, they're talking to us. We're getting some traction with them. Hey, look at Governor Senator Schumer, Wyden, Booker. They all have that triumvirate together. They're trying to go and get things pushed across. They try to get the Safe Banking Act through the NDAA. Oh, they're trying to put things in there. The effort's there. Thank you so much. Clap your hands for Congress for at least making some effort. But until that, if they couldn't get anything done by kind of putting it underneath other bills or other packages or other legislation, then I say to myself over and over, 3 to 5 years before we even hear anything about policymakers putting a bill to the floor for legalization nationwide. Is that the same sentiment that your guest and yourself? Do you feel like that's the same way? Or do you still feel cautiously optimistic that maybe the presidential candidates we have right now, of any of them, will actually do something to push forward? Or Congress, if they make another switch around with the change of the House and the Senate, might actually reconsider putting this back on the floor?
I gotta say, like, the current brain trust that we have in place has been good at doing one thing, and that's doing just enough to have a successful press release that's picked up, and then it goes nowhere. I don't know. I am not cautiously optimistic. I was at the beginning of Biden's term. I was just like, here we go. Green light, baby. And I guess I drank the Kool-Aid a little bit, and I let myself become a little bit I kind of lost sight of what might have actually happened politically. And then, I wound up being disappointed as a result. During this next election cycle, other than maybe if Biden sees himself, or whoever is the Democratic candidate sees themselves polling poorly, it might be one of those levers that they finally try to push in terms of generating a little bit more support. But it seems like that's the lever that they kind of tease right at the end, where they're just trying to fill a few more buses to.
But they don't want to ever say, let's pass it, legalize. They always want to say we wanted to criminalize instead. And that's what other Democratic, senatorial House representative candidates would have said before. But it's like, okay, that's the harder thing to push out there. But legalization you could do. And listen, I'm just going to say it like this. Why is it I'm hearing Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Vivek Ramaswamy? They're the ones that are supporting marijuana legalization. Why is it them? I would have thought it would have been an easy push in. Listen, if Governor Cuomo didn't have his scandal, I think he would have still been governor right now because he got that passed. And I think Biden could have gotten a lot of brownie points if he would have gone along with his own constituency, Schumer, Wyden. I mean, there was and bipartisan effort because Elizabeth Warren also puts part into the States Act that she put along with Cory Gardner. They have bipartisan support. Not even a question of that. Let's go.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me either. I mean, I am based.
It does because of the lobbying effort. I'm going to say like this.
Oh, yeah.
You know how much lobbying money's put out. And I remember when I interviewed every one of these new lobbying firms or these new lobbying organizations, the CFCR, the U.S. Cannabis Council, and I'm like, NCIA, we've already been a long relationship with them. I'm like, okay, but thank you for talking to these people. But you know what? You're not paying them money.
Yeah.
If Big Pharma is paying 3 to 4 times more money, hundreds of billions of dollars, and even cannabis with the help of tobacco and alcohol can't get across the finish line, then what else are you going to do? There's not enough money, and that tells you everything, that they are servants of the same master. They're not doing anything because they're not getting paid for it. There's nothing in it for them.
I mean, I was going to say that I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin. So I'm still in a completely prohibited state, and we're surrounded by states with forms of legalization. So we've seen every form of the political theater that can go back and forth. And it is frustrating because it's the same thing. It's just it's a talking point to gain a little bit of interest here and there. But and the reason that you see that from some of the fringe candidates is because they're fringe candidates, right?
Right.
I mean, you see the photo that they post with the upcoming GOP debates, and there's like 10 people on there, and you're like, not really certain who 8 of these guys are. But, so they got to stand out amongst the crowd. And
the problem is you're going to see that. I don't want to say it like this, but it's just true. If you're watching, well, where's Trump? They're going to say these people aren't Trump. It's like, because people are going to be too closed-minded. They're not paying attention to the media. They're just going to say, oh, well, he's not on there. Like, what do you mean these other people? They're not going to go anywhere. They already know because they know it, man. So
no, Agreed. And I just it's been very frustrating. It's been very frustrating, particularly Madison is very close to the Illinois border. We have a senator here, Senator Agard, who does a very good job of speaking out about how every time she goes to visit the dispensary just across the border in Illinois, 9 cars out of 10 all have Wisconsin plates. And so you think of if you just speak their language, if you just speak money, that sweet tax money they're looking for, that would make enough sense in order to do some sort of bipartisan effort to do any form of legalization in Wisconsin. And they just can't. They just can't because they can't concede the point to the other.
Right. I will give credit for those. What was it in Milwaukee? The Rastafarian church that was selling cannabis out of their congregation. That was pretty sneaky, pretty shady, but it didn't work. But at least they tried to make effort to go and sell over there. But yeah.
I think that was in Madison. I think there was one in Madison as well. Yeah. Because we drove by one. There was one just down the road from our office.
Right.
And I was like, it's definitely advertised. That's part of their religion.
When it came out last year, I remember we were trying to do a Facebook live stream and we talked about the story. It was like, oh my God, that was hilarious. But it was a nice try. Wisconsin, now, is it something is it going to be on the ballot in 2024? Because right now for Florida, where I'm at, we're waiting to see adult use. The petition's already been passed. They got past 900,000 signatures. So I'm pretty sure right after Supreme Court's going to go ahead and hopefully stamp this up, and they're going to hit their, they'll put the stamp on it and say, okay, push it forward, let it be on the ballot. Is Wisconsin going to get there?
I don't think so. Like right now,
it's got to be before Texas, though.
I don't know. No, I was. Who was I just joking with? I think it was Marion. Because he's from Kansas.
Yeah.
So we were joking about how what state is going to be last? Is it going to be Wisconsin or Kansas? And it's a real race to the bottom. But just because don't discount the stubborn nature of Wisconsin politicians. Wisconsin Republicans teased a little bit that they might consider small medicinal use legislation, but then right after that, I can't remember the person. I think it was Voss, who was just like, yeah, we'll consider medicinal use, but we're no California. All right. Everyone calm down. We're a nice Midwestern state, and we're just going to look at therapeutic use. God. Yeah. So it's incredibly frustrating. I like one of the things I like to say about some good that prohibition has done in Wisconsin is it has done gangbusters for the billboard market in Wisconsin, because anytime you get close to the Illinois border, every billboard says legal cannabis 10 minutes away, even up north. Cause like the UP, Michigan sitting on top of Wisconsin, you go to a Packer game and already in Green Bay, you're starting to see like, hey, you're just 90 minutes away from legal cannabis. And so at least they're spending money on marketing.
No, it's true. Let's go ahead and leave it there. So again, want to go and make sure to promote cannabisequipmentnews.com. And of course, you can go ahead and look for the podcast there. You'll see it up on the top of the page. And how many interviews have you done so far, if you got to count?
I think we're on 120.
Nice.
90. I think, no, we're coming up on 100. Sorry, we have two different podcasts. Let me see if I can get a hard number on that one.
Just think right now, because I was looking at what I have right now for Blunt Business. I was looking at, I'm currently going to get up to, this will be what, 336 or something like that. Like we've gone pretty good while, and that was after a while. It was in 2020. We were doing 3 shows a week because I had such an influx of people that wanted to get on. So we took that influx of all these PR companies and all coming across with guests and all this and that. And then the grassroots marketing, forget about it. That's 660 some odd shows right there. That's just
you've been going
away
since like 2015, right?
Correct. Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, that's an incredible run. We're just we're at 110. So this Friday's episode will be number 111. So we've been going weekly for almost 2 years now.
Congratulations. That's good that you're really going to keep up and stay so consistent for all of this. So that's really wonderful. And, obviously I see the guest list that you have on, a lot of respectable names we've had on ourselves. And like you mentioned, Sunday Seifried, we actually had her on our Plant Profits program, and she didn't mention about that ATM story, I don't believe, but we did get a good backstory on her and where she came from. So it's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, she literally wrote the book. She on the episode. I think it was they had a recent acquisition. It was the Afra acquisition. I'm probably butchering that.
Right.
But when they acquired the company, the CEO said something like, when I started this competitor, I had two things. Like, I had your book and like his business plan. So, she literally wrote the book on cannabis finance.
Wow. Amazing. So let's go and finish up again, website there. And then anything else you want to just go ahead and make mention of that people should go when they go to cannabisequipmentnews.com or any other publications, take a minute to go ahead and, talk to our audience about what they should do to go ahead and stay in touch and keep in touch with what you're doing and what you're working on.
Well, first and foremost, thank you very much for having me on today, man. I really do appreciate it.
Of course.
Any chance to just kind of sit down and talk about the industry. I mean, I can do it for hours. So hopefully, if you're going to MJ Biz, you get a chance to sit down and do it a little bit more. But Cannabis Equipment News, one thing that I would stress is that we do have a daily newsletter. It goes out to about 8,000 industry professionals. A combination of new products, news. The podcast is in there. We have a regular news video series in there as well. So I would register for that on our website, just so you can see kind of, you can get a daily dose of the news that we're posting to the site every day. I'm interested to see, every time that I talk to somebody else new within the industry, I'm interested to have them visit the website. Let me know what they think. What we could increase our coverage, and where we could do better, just because, we created Cannabis Equipment News as a tool for the industry, and the ways that we can improve it are of great interest to me. So help me out.
Sounds good. Again, David Manti, who's editor-in-chief of CannabisEquipmentNews.com, and really appreciate you taking time to talk with us. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And thank you, listeners. We'll talk to you next time. The opinions expressed on this CannabisRadio.com program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CannabisRadio.com. Any rebroadcast, republication, or retransmission of this program without proper consent is prohibited.